Hello, everyone. Can I please see a thumbs up if you can hear me? Great. Okay. Thanks. We're just getting Ann connected here, and then we'll start in just a moment. I'm going to mute my microphone again.
Go.
Yep. On your...
Yep. I got it all going.
Yep, you're good. Okay, perfect.
So I'd like to call a meeting to order at 7:02. Welcome, everybody. And we'll start off with our consent agenda items, some professional staffing recommendations, and I think co-curricular usually. Yep, co-curricular recommended. Do I have a motion to approve? Craig?
I'll second.
We have a second. Okay. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, motion from Craig, second from Ann. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes by majority. Okay. Some personnel items unnecessary for vote, and what am I missing here? Can I go into the fall planning? No, there was no public comments, so we go into fall planning update.
I'm going to, Arlen, you could use your microphone, please.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Could I have a thumbs up again if you can hear me okay? Thank you. And Christine, I'm sorry. I think I saw you say something a moment ago, but the speaker on my computer was turned off and I didn't hear you. So I apologize for that. All right. We're going to do an update this evening on fall planning for the start of school, which begins tomorrow. As you know, Public Health released new orders 2 weeks ago that have implications for us that we've talked about a little bit previously, and we've talked about with our welcome back to staff messages. So I'm going to go through that this evening. I'd like to thank Dr. Merwin. Dr. Tom Merwin is with us this evening. He is our district medical advisor, and he and I have had a number of conversations about how the new public health orders and school metrics come into play for our decision-making about moving through the steps of our gradual reopening plan. And so I'm going to go through I'm going to share my screen in a moment. I'll go through the updates. And then when we get to the section about the new metrics coming from public health, Dr. Merwin is joining us this evening to add his advice and counsel to the board and to answer any questions that you may have. So with that, I'm going to get this moving. Okay. So as we've done at just about every board meeting since mid-July, we'll start with a public health status update, and then we will move into the details on the public health order itself and the implications for our district in terms of decision making and following our framework. So these data are Public Health Madison and Dane County daily snapshot data from the data dashboard. To date, we've had just over 5,400 cases of COVID-19 confirmed in Dane County, over 251,000 tests total. We've had 328 cases hospitalized, and sadly, we've had 40 people pass away due to COVID-19 in Dane County to date. That's this information here. One of the metrics that we watch very closely, and we'll be looking at it with slightly different eyes given the new orders, is this chart over here, also from the Public Health Madison and Dane County dashboard, that shows new cases. Those are the teal colored columns, and the 7-day average of new cases. That's the blue line that looks like a mountain range here. The graph starts all the way back in March when data were first being reported regarding COVID-19, and then we see a big spike towards the beginning of the summer, and then gradually kind of working our way back down the mountain, if you will, with little ups and downs along the way, and then we're right over here right now. So we've had a little bit of an uptick recently, but then just in the last couple of days starting to come back down in the 7-day average. I'll talk more about the importance of the of the average caseload over a period of time as we get into the public health orders a little bit later on. But that is the current status. And then the forward DANE metrics are updated every Thursday. Two that we've been keeping a close eye on are lab reporting timeliness and contact tracing. That still remains at the yellow level. It had been red for a number of weeks. That is currently at yellow. And then community spread is still at red. Community spread, of course, is the degree to which a case, the percentage of cases, of new cases that are confirmed to which the source cannot be identified. So those are two forward DANE metrics that we keep an eye on in the big picture. And the implications of the public health situation, obviously, the virus will remain a threat until the vaccine is developed and or there is a treatment. We have to follow very carefully frequent cleaning and disinfecting procedures. Obviously, face coverings are in order, distancing is in order. Teaching prevention behaviors is very important. And it's important for everybody to understand that all students and staff are vulnerable to the virus, which is why we have a number of procedures in place in compliance with public health orders to help keep everybody as safe as we possibly can. So that's the current public health data at a very high level. I'd like to turn our attention to Public Health Madison-Dane County Order number 9, which was released on Friday the 21st, and then there were some updates made to the school metrics just this past Friday. So I'll walk through this information here, and then we'll talk about the implications of the new public health order for our school district, and specifically with 4K and our criteria for changing steps. So just to highlight here, effective, this is order number 9, as I said, was released on Friday, August 21, and it went into effect on Monday, August 24 for all public and private schools in Dane County. There are 4 points here that are really stand out in the order that I think are really have bring a lot to bear on our planning. First is a new requirement in the childcare and youth settings guidance for children ages 5 and up, that these age students, even in a youth settings context, are now required to maintain 6 feet social distancing to the greatest extent possible. That is a new requirement. 4K classrooms have always been under the child care and youth settings rules, but this 6-foot distancing for students ages 5 and up is new. And so that has had some impact on 4K programming. And in a couple of minutes, Greg Nelson and Brooke Hauser will be able to speak to that. Another key piece of order number 9 is that grades K through 2 may open for in-person instruction under the public health school requirements that were released in July. However, grades 3 through 12 must open virtually for instruction. There is no in-person instruction allowed under order number 9 for students in grades 3 through 12. There are some very limited exceptions for students, for some students who might receive health services in school. Those are very, very narrow exceptions. There are still a lot of questions about supporting students with disabilities, IEPs and 504 plans under this order, and public health is in consultation with DPI so that they can gain a more clear understanding of what is required to be provided, and so that they can update their update their orders accordingly. So that's where we are with what we can offer in terms of in-person instruction. However, school facilities are open for staff, and staff have been working in the buildings for the last 2 weeks. And school facilities may be open for food distribution, healthcare services, such as childcare and youth settings, for pickup of student materials, and for government functions, such as a school board meeting, as we're doing this evening. So the implications of order number 9 are really threefold. The first one is, and as you saw it communicated last week, the new requirement for 6-foot distancing for children 5 years of age and older in childcare settings really caused us to have to reorganize some things for 4K. And so we will be, as we announced last week, we will not be beginning 4K tomorrow, September 1. We will be beginning our 4K program next Tuesday, September 8th, and that is to allow time for our 4K site providers to make the logistical changes needed to accommodate 6-foot distancing, which we are able to do. And I'll invite Greg in just a moment to jump in on that. Virtual in-person supports are postponed for the time being for grades 3 through 12 while we await clarification from public health as far as what may be allowable in really unique circumstances there. So we can continue to do in-person supports for grades K through 2, and those will be underway, but 3 through 12 is on hold until for the time being. And then there are new criteria, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, for step transitions in our gradual reopening framework. Those are the new metrics that Public Health released. So so I'd like to invite Greg Nelson to step in and talk to us about 4K. So Greg, go ahead and turn your microphone on there, and I'll make sure that the sound's coming through on our end.
Great. Can you hear me, Andrew?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
Excellent. Good evening, everybody. Great to see you all. So as Andrew has foreshadowed and kind of set the stage for, up until last Friday, we had been under the understanding that 4K was going to be, fine to open in person, even kind of termed what we're calling normal 4K under the childcare guidelines. We weren't needing to enforce that 6-foot distancing to the greatest extent possible in 4K because of those guidelines. But then that changed on Friday. The change was we need to enforce that 6-foot distancing to the greatest extent possible for children ages 5 and up in childcare settings. So of course, with our 4K students coming into 4K, being 4, some of them turning 5 very quickly into the school year, and by the end of the year, the majority of them being 5 years old, we really needed to evaluate what 4K could look like with that update. And so we really quickly started brainstorming with the 3 site directors, district administration too, and we explored a variety of options of what 4K could look like. We explored options of going to different days, additional staffing, things like that. But what we came down to was the fact that we are fortunate to be able to provide the space to distance kids without having to create new classes, without having to hire new staff. Basically what we're doing is each of the sites, so CLM, Little Spartans, and then Gingerbread, which is at CEPS this year, they are able to keep the classes that they have intact with the understanding that each class has a 4K teacher and has a 4K assistant. We are able to provide 2 spaces for every 4K class to use at CLM, at Little Spartans, and also at CEPS for Gingerbread House, where they are identifying when the kids are going to be, kind of around each other for a prolonged period of time. For example, sitting at a table spot or sitting at a spot on the ground, and they've been able to physically distance those desks and those sitting spots on the ground 6 feet apart in those 2 spaces. So what that looks like is there's going to be periods of the day where the 4K group is split in half. Half will be with the 4K teacher. So with the 15 student enrollment camp in 4K, perhaps 7, 8 students will be with the teacher in one room. 7, 8 students will be with the 4K assistant in another room. The 4K assistant, of course, doing the activities and the instruction that's already been designed and coached by the 4K teacher. That's not to say that they're becoming 2 distinct classes. There's going to be periods of the day where maybe they're flip-flopping, or maybe just the interactions between students. We're not worried about that prolonged exposure, the cumulative 15 minutes, and they're not going to be sitting, on the ground or sitting at a table spot. So the whole group will be getting together for portions of the day as well. So feeling really fortunate that we didn't have to cut back the days that 4K are going to be meeting in person. Feeling great that we didn't have to upend the apple cart again and redo placement, which could impact families as far as are they getting AM, PM, which site they're going to be at, et cetera. It feels great to know that working with the 4K directors, the 4K teachers and assistants, and the district admin, we're able to come up with this plan where they're still going to be meeting in person. They're still going to be meeting 4 days a week. They're still in the same assigned classes and AM, PM sections that were previously communicated to families. And it's all safe to do so under the health criteria. So the reason for the delay was because as of last Friday, the previous Friday, but up and through all of last week, we needed to figure all of that out and make sure that the plan was in place and that the teachers were prepared for those adjustments that we made. So that's kind of the recap of what happened in a little over the past week related to 4K.
Thanks, Greg. Are there any questions? Are there any questions for Greg before we move on?
I don't think so. Good report. Thank you,
Okay,
Greg.
great. Thanks very much, Greg.
Great to see you all.
You too. I'm going to go back to the slide deck here. And I'm going to transition now into, as I mentioned, the virtual in-person supports are postponed for grades 3 through 12 because we're not allowed to provide in-person instruction in grades 3 through 12. And then we're going to talk next about the other part of order number 9, which was the school criteria, reopening and closing criteria that Public Health Madison and Dane County released. Before we get into that, I want to just take a moment and review the criteria that we had developed locally here at the school district over the summer. And so we had coordinated with Public Health and with Dr. Merwin to develop our own criteria in the absence of guidance from DHS at the state level or Public Health at the local level throughout the summer. So when we put these forward in July, the intent was we will use these. This is our best thinking at the time, absent broader guidance or rules from Public Health or DHS. And so just as a reminder, we were looking at, in order to move from step 2, which is virtual learning, to step 3, which is limited in-person attendance, the hybrid model, we were looking at all of the Dane County metrics being reported. We were looking at Dane County orders allowing for in-person attendance. We were looking at new cases in the 7-day average. That's that mountain range graphic I shared earlier, showing a 14-day declining trend. And we were looking at community spread and lab reporting timeliness and contact tracing, both being scored as yellow in the Forward Dane weekly report. And then those are the public health data. And then we also looked at internal indicators of student and staff health being acceptable to make a step change. And then in consultation with our district medical advisor, kind of as the last check in the process. And so that's what we had approved in that when we first designed our gradual reopening framework. These are the criteria to go from virtual to hybrid, limited in-person attendance, and then very similar, moving from hybrid into full attendance with cohorts, essentially the same metrics, but community spread shifting to green. And so that's what we had in place up until the new metrics were released by Public Health. So I'd like to take a moment and describe how those work. So these are the new Public Health Madison-Dane County metrics for reopening and closing schools. As I said, these were released on the 21st of August. And oh, sorry, hold on a second here. There we go. They were released on the 21st of August and were updated slightly just with some more. The metrics themselves were not changed, but there was some more background information released on the 28th. So the target is to look at the 14-day case average of new cases and have a target number in mind for that that's sustained over 4 weeks. And then there's a different target for K2, 3, 5, and 6, 12. And so the staff are already allowed to be in schools under Order 9. So this target does not apply to that. 4K, as we talked about, comes under childcare and youth settings rules. So that's a different set of rules as well. Although, as we mentioned, 5-year-old children are now required to maintain 6-foot distancing to the greater extent possible. So here's where this new metric comes in. In order for K2 students in grades K through 2 to be able to attend school in person, and by in person, that's still within the parameters of the public health school orders school rules that were released in July. Public Health is using a threshold of 54 cases per day on average, sustained for 4 weeks. So 54 or lower, sustained over 4 weeks, and public health public health orders allow for in-person instruction for students in grades K through 2. Now, we met that criteria on August 18th, and this is why that when order number 9 was released on a couple days later on August 21st, that K2 was allowed to attend in person. So this is the threshold for K2. The threshold for students in grades 3 through 5 is a little lower. That's 39 cases per day. Just as of last Thursday is the first time that we actually that 14-day case average reached 39. So we're now, as they say, on the clock for that 4-week time period. And if this new case average, 14-day case average, holds at 39 or lower for 4 weeks, counting from August 22nd, then public health, if the other conditions are in place, public health will consider students in grades 3 through 5 being able to attend in person. Most likely, they will issue an updated order when we get to that point. And so the similar thought process, but a lower threshold for new cases. For students in grades 6 through 12, the threshold is 19 cases per day as an average, the 14-day case average being 19 sustained over 4 weeks. And right now we're at 39 as of the 27th, last Thursday. And our target for grades 6 through 12 is 19. So we have quite a ways to go yet for 19. We're getting closer for grades 3 through 5. It's good to see that we're on the clock, as they say, but we're not there yet. That still takes some time. So I'm going to try and move my.
Can you repeat the high school one again?
Sure. The high school threshold is 19. Yep. And currently we're at 39. And so when we have a new 14-day case average of 19 or lower for 4 consecutive weeks, then Public Health Madison-Dane County will consider allowing in-person instruction for students in grades 6 through 12. All right, I'm going to shift things around here for just a second. And there's one other piece of information on that slide that's being covered up that I want to be able to share. It's very important down at the bottom. If I can, there we go. All right. So there are additional public health considerations that are part of the metrics and the order. And this language is taken from the public health document. So public health will assess the 14-day case average here and making these determinations about when the different students in different grade levels can transition to in-person instruction. They are also going to take into account forward Dane metrics, data trajectory. Are we improving on the whole? Are we declining on the whole? Or are things getting worse, getting better? They'll look at current best practices as best understood in research, federal and state guidance, and other unforeseen influencing factors in when they make the decision. So it won't simply be the case average hits this number and we go. They will look at that as kind of the first gatekeeper criterion, and then public health will assess their other information as well, and then make a determination. And then at that point, schools will have the option, will have the ability to move forward in their plans. At the same time, it's very important to mention that public health will assess and determine if distance learning is required for everybody, if the 14-day case average gets higher than 54. And remember, 54 is the threshold for K2. So if at the county level, if that new case average gets higher than 54, then public health may issue an order saying everybody has to go to distance learning because our public health conditions are deteriorating. And so those are the new metrics for public health. All right.
Could I?
Yeah, go ahead. Craig, you want to, go ahead and unmute, and I'll mute mine.
Okay. Well, I don't know how Dane County Madison Public Health records the new cases, but to me, it seems almost unfortunate that the university is starting virtually.
Yeah.
That's not the right word. They're starting at essentially the same time, as the high schools are making their start. So my suspicion would be that in the next 10 days to 2 weeks, we're probably going to have a significant spike in the number of cases due to the fact that the university is back in session and all these high schools started at the same time. Am I safe to assume that we'll know where these new cases are coming from, whether it be a high school situation or a community situation or a college situation?
Let me try and answer that one. Thanks, Craig. Let me answer that, and then I'll invite Dr. Merwin to weigh in on that as well. The question of how university data are reported in the greater public health Madison-Dane County data has come up a number of times. The university cases are included in the county public health data because they live in the county, and so they don't have a way of parsing that out. So I think it's certainly when you look at how universities have unfolded across the country, it's not unreasonable to anticipate that there's going to be an uptick in case data. We won't know that until we move through the next couple of weeks. Dr. Merwin, this would be a good time for you to jump in and add some wisdom to the thinking here.
All right, thanks for inviting me tonight. Craig, I agree with you that the university students have no idea how much power they hold in keeping public schools opened or not. I do like these new numbers because they're based on solid science of different cutoffs for moderate activity, moderate high activity, and the younger the children are, the less they seem to be able to spread it. And that's, I think, why they came up with these different numbers. I like these criteria better than the ones that we originally came up with, because this is very clean and very specific. And it allows not only Andrew, but also the teachers can look at this, the parents can look at this, and they can kind of know what's coming down the pipe. I think that's part of the anxiety that doesn't matter what place you're in, a healthcare setting or school setting. Part of the anxiety is not knowing when things are going to change and what's coming up. And we know that the changes are going to happen and we're going to have to roll with them, but this gives us some very concrete numbers to look at to say, I think we're going to be able to, or no, it looks like it's going in the wrong direction. So everybody can plan.
Thanks very much, Tom. Oh, Christine's got a question.
Yeah, I have a question about the math. I'm confused about the 14-day average and how that, like, I understand it's an average over 14 days. So if you took 2 days, one day it's 100, one day is 2, and around the average would be around 50. Where does the 14 days start and end? So I don't get that window. I don't understand that window. Can you help me with that?
Tom, would you like to speak to that one?
So I don't know what the exact date is for the 14-day window. I know the logic behind it is if you get a spike on one day or really no number on the other day, it prevents more of that wiggle. So you get more of a representation over time when you look back at 14 days of what's truly going on, where they may have missed some cases one day and they're reported the next day. Kind of evens that out a little bit because we know this reporting isn't perfect.
So great, that helps a lot. So the 54 number, so the average is taken every day, right? So it has to be 54 every day, and then so that would take into account the increases and decreases. Okay, that makes
Correct.
sense. Yeah, I was really confused, especially in light of Craig's question, because I know that's a real concern across at least our community right now. Thank you.
And then the one piece that I would add to that is that Public Health releases their update on that every Thursday. And so that's when they update all of their metrics, they will announce as of this date, we met that criteria. For example, the 39 14-day average hit 39 on August 22nd, and they will be monitoring that. They will continue to monitor that every day. That 14-day window just moves one day to the next all the way through, and then they will make their update each Thursday as to whether we've sustained that for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or fallen away from that, which they'll also announce if that's the case.
So is the university gonna do it like business as usual up there? Is that what they're gonna be doing? Or because they're not gonna be doing anything that's changing how they number of kids per classes or how they handling it? They're not changing anything, just kind of doing what they normally did? Because I had some parents that I met, I can't remember, at the store or something, they were wondering, they had, I think there was 5 kids in the dorm, must have been a floor or something all together right away. They're all going, and I thought, everything that's happening, that can just kind of sink just about the ship for all of us, just with that alone, I imagine, for getting chances to keep school
Yeah, the university
normal
is
as we could. If
the
they're
university is changing a lot of things.
like it's
the-
not,
I think
there you go.
Tom, would you mind speaking about UW's plans,
Yeah,
please? Because
so-
you're probably more familiar with their details than I am.
So the university has made most of their classes virtual. Most of the in-person classes in the university are actually smaller discussion groups as opposed to big, large lectures. They're also testing all the students when they get to the dorms, and they're decreasing the number of students in the dorms, so there's not as dense a population, and requiring them to be tested every, I think, 2 weeks, or every so often they have to be tested. Uh, they all have to have a bag ready, because if they turn up positive, they're going to be asked to go to a quarantine dorm so that they can try to limit the spread. So the university, I think, is trying to do their part in getting some people back in person, but having most people virtual, and they're going to be doing it like everybody else, just week by week, seeing how they need to be changed or updated.
I'm glad to hear that, because I was kind of concerned when maybe the parent was just as confused as I was about it, and that at least gives us a fighting chance. you know.
Go ahead, Christine.
I can also speak to the faculty and staff side, and that they're only allowing essential staff on campus, faculty on campus who have to be there because they're running research labs, or they have mice colonies or something that they need to take care of. So most of us are still at home and will be for quite a while. They're also enforcing a very strong mask policy. And when we had a meeting in our School of Education, the question was asked, what will happen if someone refuses to wear a mask in a class? And she said that they would be kicked out of the class. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it made me feel like administration was taking it pretty seriously about student expectations. So.
Thanks, Christine. Craig, did you have a question also?
Yes.
Over the last, I guess, week to 10 days sometimes in trying to fight off boredom, I'll just hop in the car and kind of take a ride around. And I noticed up on campus, even though they are starting in a total virtual mode, more or less, it appears to me like most of the students are moving in as though a more or less regular or normal school year is going to happen. My suspicion is that even though they're virtual, they're going to be virtual from their apartments or dorms or frat houses or sorority houses, whatever that may be. And I'm not so sure if maybe that isn't inviting more close contact. If you've got a house full of students that are all working virtually, as opposed to all those students being spread out in their own homes, in their own communities, it would seem to me the likelihood of getting COVID is greater with all the students in their living quarters, as though studies were in person. At least that's the way it looked to me. There was a lot of activity, a lot of moving vans, just, it looked like a typical moving in day on campus. And I know
Tom, do you have, Tom Irwin, do you have any thoughts on Craig's observation?
Well, I think it does look a lot like a normal move-in, but they're trying to decrease the contact between people who aren't coming in contact with each other on a regular basis. So if you've got roommates and you're all doing your virtual in your roommates, you're already exposed to them. So I think they're doing the best they can. Each university is trying to figure out how to do this in the new era. And the dorms are, like I say, the dorms have testing requirements in place to hopefully catch the cases early if they happen, and prevent the whole floor or the whole dorm from blowing up. So I think they've got their precautions in place and they're doing the testing, and we'll have to wait and see. They can't control, unfortunately, the extracurricular activities that some of these kids do, but even with a lot of students walking around campus, they're walking down the street with their masks on. So I think many of the students are getting the message that they need to protect themselves and everybody else.
Thanks, Tom. There are just a couple more slides in this update that I'd like to talk through that relate to metrics. So I'm going to transition the screen back over to the slide deck and slide this over here. What we need to do next is we're going to ask the board to make a decision about incorporating the public health metrics that we just spent a little bit of time talking about here. This slide with the based on the 14-day case average sustained over 4 weeks with a different threshold for K2, 3, 5, and 6, 12. After spending quite a bit of time talking with Dr. Merwin, what I'm recommending in consultation with Dr. Merwin is that we replace the step change criteria that we adopted in July in terms of the metrics pieces with the public health criteria that were released on the 21st as part of order number 9. And the reason we're making that recommendation is just recalling back to July, we adopted the criteria locally in the absence of specific guidance, and now we have that. And so what my recommendation to the board would be to make that change, and that would leave us with criteria for step change looking like this. Number 1 would be the current public health orders and metrics allow for a district step transition. The second criteria for us to move forward in a step change would be that our internal indicators of student and staff health are acceptable. And the third would be consultation with Dr. Merwin as our district medical advisor, that it would be acceptable to move forward in a step transition. And as a note, we will continue to provide at least 2 weeks notice, advance notice to students, families, and staff of a step transition that increases in-person instruction, as we have committed for some time. If things change and we have to move backwards, that decision that wouldn't be a 2-week warning. That would be we need to change right away. So just as a caveat there. And so that's based on everything that we've been talking about this evening, that will be my recommendation when we get to the action item here later in the agenda. Dr. Merwin, is there anything you'd like to add to our thinking about? You mentioned it a little bit ago about the benefits that the new. Sorry, I'm trying to do too many things at once here. I'll just stop sharing my screen. We talked about how the new metrics from public health have the benefit of being very clear, very easy to follow, and they incorporate many of the metrics that we had been looking at internally earlier. But could I ask you to share a little bit more about the benefit of making that change and just relying on those public health metrics?
Yeah, the old metrics that we had originally come up with in June were not very specific. They're increasing or decreasing or yellow or green, and it's very difficult. I know when I try to go on the website and try to follow what the metrics are, it's very easy to get lost in the weeds pretty quickly. These new metrics I like because they're very specific and they're an easy number to measure, as opposed to how quickly are we turning around the COVID testing, which may reflect more of supply issues than they actually do number of cases. So number of cases is really what's driving the opening and closing, and I think it's a better metric.
Thanks, Dr. Merwin. Craig has a question for you.
Yeah, I'm wondering your feelings, your opinion on the relationship between school starts tomorrow and teaching our kids and the introduction of extracurricular activities at some point, whether it be clubs, drama, music, athletics. Is that a hand in glove situation that one follows directly in line with the other? Or is there a point where for specific activities, maybe it's safe enough to go ahead and open those up to participation, whereas the higher and medium risk activities would come later.
Yeah, I don't know that I've looked into that specific question very much. I know there are different levels of risk of activities, but I guess my gut feeling is if we can't get the kids back in school, sports is certainly secondary and should not be taking place if we can't get kids back in school. That's my own personal feeling, and maybe that's not based on science, and maybe people would disagree, but
That's what I was looking for.
I'll just add to that, if I could, just briefly. Part of the order number 9 also speaks to in-person instruction, including extracurricular activities. And so if you think about, it's not called out as specifically as it was in the Safer at Home order in the spring, but if you think back to March, when school was closed, it was closed for pupil instruction, for curricular and extracurricular activities. Where we do perhaps have some of those opportunities, and I think they would be on a very limited basis, would be in youth settings, activities such as you'll see MRAP, McFarland Recreation and Play programming on a very limited level. You know, the pool is open on a very, very, very limited level, things of that nature. But in terms of what we think of a traditional fall sports season, that's not in the cards.
Okay.
Yep.
Christine had a question.
Okay.
Thank you. I can understand the desire to keep the two consistent. Andrew, you mentioned earlier, though, that the Dane County Health Department might use other data to make the decision. So is there any risk of us being out of line or out of sync with their decisions, even though we're using that one indicator? Does that make sense?
I think so. Let me see if I've got your question. Are you wondering if we're because are you asking if by making the change to using the 14-day case average benchmarks in order to make our decisions about transitioning from step 2 to step 3, step 3 to step 4, and so on, if I think we could run afoul of public health? Is that do I have that right?
Correct, because if I understood you correctly earlier, you had said that they might use other data. So, let's pretend that the average was 39, but really the trend was really, really, really high, and the average was only staying at 39 because it had been so low. The 39 might be actually not a good indicator of the trend if it was going up. So public health might say, we don't really care about 39. We've had 100 cases the last few days, and that's because we were so low. So I just don't want to run against each other. If you're, so that's my only, I think it's a great idea. It's my only concern. So I guess I'm saying maybe it's an either or an both and, like both you follow the 39 and that running day average, but you also follow what they say, which is kind of a given, but it might need to be a little bit more laid out. I guess that's my distinction with that.
I got it. I think I can speak to that and provide some clarity there. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again and show a couple pieces in the slides. So Christine, I think the piece that you're describing comes from this slide down here at the bottom. Additional public health considerations include data trajectory, current best practices, and so on. And so they will be looking at the public health department when they make a determination to open up in-person instruction to a wider range of students. They will first be looking at all of the metrics up here in terms of the case average, but at the same time, they will be considering these other factors down here, which include the forward Dane metrics, data trajectory, and so forth, and unforeseen influencing factors, which is unforeseen. And so I think we don't have to worry about running afoul of public health, because in our metrics, the first thing we're going to look for is a public health order allowing us to move forward. And public health won't issue that order unless this information here with the 14-day case average and in combination with these other factors, that public health is comfortable with all of it as a package. And so we as a district will not be looking solely at these numbers. We can follow these numbers as they're reported to give us an idea of when to anticipate when we could possibly make a change or not, or unlikely to make a change. But fundamentally, we're going to be waiting on here we go. We're going to be waiting on public health to issue a new order that would be reflective of all of that information together. So I think we're on solid footing that way.
Yeah, you and I are totally on the same page. I think why it's important is I think right now transparency and communication is so key, as you know, and people are throwing around the numbers, so they're aware of the numbers. So if we are going to say we're going to use those numbers, that's going to be what people might look at without all those other caveats to opening. So I just wanted to make that really clear that when we communicate that we're also, it's not just that number. We all wish, we all wish. So that's all. I'm trying to make sure that we're transparent and communicative to the community. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to just step over there to let my dog out real quickly, but I'm here and I'm listening.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Are there other questions for Dr. Merwin?
I think it was very helpful.
Oh, go ahead and unmute there, Arlen.
I think all this information tonight and how everything was presented was very helpful. We had really good questions
I feel a lot
about
more
it.
comfortable because I didn't know what to think.
And I feel a lot more comfortable because I didn't know what to think with the parents that I talked to at the
I think all in
W,
all,
how we were all gonna sit like Craig was talking.
It's worth a good shot.
But I think all in all, I think we got
I
a good,
appreciate the
a good
expertise
spot
in
to
everybody's
go
opinion.
forward. I appreciate the expertise in everybody's opinions on it too.
Thank you very much, Tom. Been very helpful. Well-
I'm like you, we're all just trying to do the best thing for the kids.
Alan, did you have a question or was that a wave of thank you or?
No, that was a thank you without interrupting everyone.
Okay, there we go. We got it. We're good.
You good?
I think we're all set. Well, Tom Merwin, thank you so much for all your help and consultation as always. And thank you very much for joining us for tonight's board meeting.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Thank you, you too. Okay, so that concludes my report on fall planning. And then there will be an action item to adjust the decision criteria as discussed this evening later on in the action item section. There we go, we're good.
All right, so now we're into the action items. Action on revised criteria for step transitions under McFarland School District framework for the gradual reopening of schools. Description: administration in consultation with District Medical Advisor Dr. Thomas Merwin recommends revising the step criteria as presented during tonight's meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? Craig? And second? Questions and comments?
I know that you put the revised order up. Can you just give me a brief synopsis of how does it change?
Oh,
You know, what, if we go ahead and okay, the revised criteria, what difference is there between that and the one that we had approved previously?
I'll be glad to answer that. Thanks, Craig. So the difference between the criteria that we had adopted previously are this. Previously we were looking at the 7-day case average, which is a shorter timeline. We were looking for a 14-day pattern of declining average. That's a narrower time frame, and it's a less precise measure of a threshold of new cases themselves. So in terms, when we're looking at case counts, we've got a more precise metric now coming from public health. And the metric itself is based on taking data over a longer period of time.
Okay.
And so we're looking at, basically the change there is setting a higher threshold. Yep, a more, if you will, a more conservative threshold
Gotcha.
in terms of that 7-day, that case average metric.
Gotcha.
The other thing that we're doing is we will no longer be focusing on, as a school district, although we're certainly cognizant of it, for the purposes of our decision making, we won't be focusing on whether community spread is yellow, red, or green, or whether lab testing is yellow, red, or green, and so on. And the reason that we feel we don't need to do that is public health is already considering those forward-day metrics in combination with the new case average. And so they're taking a very holistic picture of the public health situation. And so what we're doing is effectively saying we're going to take a step back and we are going to make our decision based on what public health orders dictate.
Mhm.
Public health orders are based on that 14-day average over 4 weeks and the other factors in the forward-day metric.
Okay.
And the other thing that's changing is and I think there's real value in this, is the criteria we put forward before represented our best thinking in consultation with Dr. Merwin and with public health, but none of us are public health experts. And so we're taking the recommendation directly from the public health experts in Dane County to make that
Our
decision.
decisions are based on data and science.
Exactly. That's correct. Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Motion from Craig, second from Ann. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I,
Passes by majority. Next is action on addendum to Insight High School of Wisconsin Charter Agreement. Description: administration recommends approval of the attached addendum. Do I have a motion to approve? A second? Do I have a second? Christine. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, motion from Ann, second from Christine. Oh, you got a comment? I didn't see it. Sorry. Go ahead.
I know it's hard with virtual, but I'm sorry. I know it's hard with virtual because there's always that pause and delay of the voice going over the air. What is the addendum? What's changed? Can someone give a little background to this? Thanks.
Sure thing. So DPI has communicated with us about the Insight enrollment process, and they need us to make an adjustment to the way we handle enrollment to Insight through open enrollment. They need us to allow any student to request placement at Insight as part of the open enrollment process. Previously, we would have them apply to WEVA, and then they would be they could request it once they were enrolled in WEVA, and if they met the criteria and there were space, then they could shift over from WEVA to Insight. DPI is asking us to revise that process to allow students to request placement directly to Insight School. And they still have to meet the same criteria in terms of being eligible to attend an at-risk school. And in doing so, because Insight has an enrollment cap by statute of 250 students, we need to put a selection process in place to accommodate if we were ever in a situation where we had more requests to attend Insight than there were space. So we're putting in basically a lottery system procedure, just like we do when we have space for open enrollment in our brick and mortar schools. When we have requests to come in or in excess of the available space, then there's a wait list, and then there's there we go. And then there's a wait list, and then there's a lottery basically to determine who that goes into. And so in order for us to come into compliance with DPI's revised enrollment procedure, we needed to write the addendum to the Insight Charter. So that's been reviewed with K-12 and 4 Lakes and our district legal counsel, and it's ready for your approval. Craig.
Okay. First of all, how many applicants do we have currently? Do we ever come close to that 250 threshold under the old process? Would it follow then probably that given the new streamline process would maybe even increase the potential applicants for Insight if they don't have to be referred to Insight by WEVA? It seems to me there would be more that we'd be at that 250 threshold quicker.
It's possible that we would exceed the space availability. I don't know off the top of my head the exact number of applicants, but I know traditionally it's been very, very close to being full. And we've had in the past requests to attend Insight that WEVA has had to respectfully decline for lack of space. And so it's possible that this change in procedure would also increase the number of requests, which is also why we would need to have that procedure in place to accommodate that. Ann, 1 second. Go ahead. There we go.
Okay. Has there been any indication that there's going to be a willingness on the part of the state to up the cap from 250?
No, I haven't heard any willingness on that at all. A couple years ago, we wrote a waiver request, and it was basically tabled by DPI. We will be revisiting that. The school was still pretty new when we wrote that waiver.
Yeah.
And so they asked us to resubmit at a point in the future once there was, more of a track record of graduation and academic performance. And so that'll be something that we'll be looking at doing soon, once the new head of school transition is complete and so forth. So, yeah.
Okay, so if there's no more discussion, we have a motion from Ann, second from Christine. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Passes by majority. Okay, next is let's see. Administration recommends an approval of an MOU regarding the district students allowing attending WEVA during the 2020-21 school year. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
And
I'll second.
second, Christine. Discussion.
Can you just give me a short version of any changes that were made in this MOU relative to the last one the last contract that we had with them?
Sure. Go ahead and mute your microphone. Okay, so I'll speak to that, and then Jeff is on the Zoom call as well, so I'll invite him to join us. What this MOU is about is recognizing that there's a significant increase in the number due to the COVID situation, there's a significant increase in the number of McFarland resident students who are choosing to attend WEVA as their virtual option during COVID. And so we've negotiated a fee structure with WEVA that is significantly lower than what would typically be the case in order to accommodate that. Jeff, would you like to jump in on that?
Sure. So yeah, the previous contract actually had the open enrollment transfer amount taken out for the resident transfers. So we actually had to revert back and look at the initial contract that was back in 2007, 2008, when we first came in to see what the language actually was, which was the normal full amount. So we discussed a rate that would be more reasonable with regards to the actual cost that the virtual school will see, as opposed to what the total dollar amount is approved by the state of Wisconsin. So we negotiated that out.
Thanks, Jeff.
There's no more comments. We have a motion from Ann, second from Christine. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes by majority. Next is action on designation of restricted fund balance for the ending fiscal year 2019-20. Administration recommends approval of the following restricted fund balance to the fiscal year 2019-20. And I have a motion. Okay, motion from Ann. There we go. Second from Craig.
Jeff, do you have a comment you can offer for the board on this one?
Yes, we missed an amount the first time around.
Could you repeat that, please? I didn't have your microphone turned on. Sorry.
We missed an amount the last time we came to the board, so we had to finalize the amount for the common school funding.
Thank you. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, motion from Ann, second from Craig. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes by majority. Motion to adjourn. Okay, and
A second.
second. I need a second from somebody. Christine? Christine, there we go. I'm sorry, Christine. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're out at 8:05.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Best wishes to the staff tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Take care, you guys.
Thank you for your kind words and support, everyone. Very much appreciated. Thank you very, very much.
See you soon.
Aaron's got the best seat in the house. All right. Good night, everyone.
Okay.
Alrighty then.
And we are offline.